U.S. Central Command says a naval blockade of Iranian ports in that critical Strait of Hormuz is set to come into effect right now. Remember, about 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait. The move is sending oil prices soaring and is threatening to upend global energy markets. The decision comes after peace talks between the U.S. and Iran ended in Pakistan over the weekend without a breakthrough. Iran says the move amounts to piracy and is threatening to retaliate. NATO and European allies say they don't support the blockade. They're urging for the waterway to be reopened. Let's kick off our coverage here this hour with NBC News senior international correspondent Matt Bradley, who is in Tel Aviv. Matt, the president's been to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, get oil flowing back to the countries that rely on it. Do we know why does he want to have this blockade in these ports right now, and how exactly is this going to work now that it kicks into effect?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, he's imposing a blockade and the Iranians have already put a blockade, and that's the cause of this crisis. The president is trying to stop Iranian ships, which have actually been operating this entire time. So this is the intention, to choke off Iran, which has been benefiting from the fact that it's been able to sell oil on the international market. Now, the risk here is a further blockade on top of a blockade. That means that we're going to be seeing now less Iranian oil reaching the market, and oil is a global commodity. So the risk here is that the price of oil could increase even more on global markets because of those markets that would have been relying on oil, like in China or other places, like we're seeing some of these unloading in India. So this is going to be possibly a move that the president means to try to subdue Iran, but it could make matters worse for global markets.
And Matt, we'll get into the markets in a moment, but let's talk about the response there in the region. How is Iran responding to this? What are we hearing from leaders around the world to this move?
Yeah, well, this is something that is being obviously condemned by the Iranians, and you know we're seeing more and more around the world an increasing realization that this confrontation and even the call for negotiations is causing more and more friction and pushing things down the line. The president's attempt to try to sell to the world that Iran has already been defeated, that this has been a victory for the United States and for Israel, these are things that aren't really going to be landing with a lot of folks, especially with a lot of foreign leaders, especially those allies, American allies, that the president had scorned and then asked for help and then scorned again for not helping.
And Matt, what got us to this point was those marathon peace talks over the weekend failing, 21 hours of peace talks. What were the main sticking points there? Why didn't they come to any sort of deal?
Yeah, well, according to the American side, we've been hearing that the main sticking points are the enriched uranium and Iran's access to a nuclear weapon. And, the United States has been characterizing this as the main issue that has been complicating and really delaying negotiations all this time. It's one of the reasons why this whole conflict came to war to begin with, because of many of these same diplomats who had been negotiating with the Iranians. So, now we're seeing once again the problem with these negotiations. They haven't really been able to get to the main issues. Now, of course, the Strait of Hormuz has become America's priority during the war. But the president is saying that it's because of this question of nuclear negotiations, of nuclear bombs, of being able to actually achieve one, which, by the way, the Iranians enjoy as parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement. They have the right to enrich uranium. But the president is saying that they want to make sure that in these negotiations that the Iranians agree to give up their right to enrich uranium. And so that is something that is really colliding here. Both of these sides are so far apart, it's going to be tough to reconcile in just a matter of weeks, let alone several years of negotiations.
Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you so much. Let's get right to NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, who's at the White House, joins us with the latest. Garrett, we know the president was up late last night posting to social media. What are we hearing from him about this blockade? Are we getting answers to some of the key questions, like how long it could last, or if other nations are going to try and help maintain it?
Well, Joe, we're getting some answers, but candidly, some of them are contradictory, and all of them are not supported with evidence that we can see. The president has suggested that this blockade could be open-ended. The idea here is to put the Iranian economy into a vice by cutting off their ability to sell their oil and natural gas products anywhere with a blockade of all of their ports, and with the hopes that that could force Iran back to the negotiating table. The president did say last night on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews on his way back here to Washington that other countries are lining up, he said, to help police the Strait of Hormuz, or the Persian Gulf essentially in its entirety, which is what would be required here. But he gave no names, and we can't find any supporting evidence of any other nations who are particularly enthusiastic about this or willing to lend their ships to what could be an open-ended effort, Joe.
Garrett, has the White House indicated what it might look like? Say a ship from a nation like China tries to leave an Iranian port. Is the U.S. military ready to do anything in that kind of situation? What might that look like?
Well, look, we could find out, Joe. I mean, the only guidance we've gotten has been from some of the president's allies. An interview with Tom Cotton, for example, this morning, a Republican senator very close to the White House, suggested that he sees this blockade playing out like the one earlier this year of all Venezuelan ports, in which the United States Coast Guard and military vessels did intercept and essentially seize ships that were departing Venezuelan ports. Look, this is a much bigger set of circumstances. There's more maritime traffic, there's bigger nations involved, and to your point, the idea that perhaps a Chinese flagged vessel or a vessel flagged to an American ally might be boarded by the U.S. could be escalatory in a way that the White House hasn't fully, or at least publicly, dealt with yet. We simply don't know how aggressive the U.S. will be in enforcing what the president and his allies insist will be a total blockade of the Iranian coastline.
Since this war began a few weeks ago, we know one of the primary goals has been opening the Strait of Hormuz, not closing it. So what's next in the process to try and do that? I mean, has the White House given any sort of clear indication of what it would take to back off this blockade?
Well, look, we saw over the weekend some U.S. ships beginning a mine-sweeping effort in the Strait and in the Persian Gulf in general. I think the idea here for the U.S. is that while ships departing from Iran's ports wouldn't be allowed to transit through the Gulf and through the Strait, ships departing from Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or other, allied or neutral nations, Qatar, would be able to begin their flow of their goods, their petrochemical products coming out of the Strait. So I think the idea here is to shake up some commerce while squeezing the Iranians and shutting down the funding for their ability to wage war. But again, Joe, this is sort of experimental enlargement of the conflict in an effort to solve it. And we're all going to find out in real time how it's going to work.
Garrett, do we expect to hear from the president at all today beyond social media? What's on the schedule?
At this hour, Joe, everything on the president's schedule is closed to the press. He has a couple of meetings stacked up throughout the course of the day. He is listed as being in what they call executive time right now, but as I look at the West Wing doors, there's no Marine stationed outside, which suggests that the president is still in the residence, not down in the Oval Office. So nothing scheduled to hear from him today, which, of course, could always change.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.